Hey everyone, what you just heard was Element Bass, the ultimate all-in-one tone and mixing solution for bass guitar. This plugin is all about giving you complete control over your bass tone by splitting it up in up to 3 separate channels, each with its own chain of processing. Whether you want just a single channel for a straightforward tone, or you want to use and blend 3 channels for a massive defined bass sound, Element Bass has you covered. Let's dive right in. The very first thing we need to go over is the channel selection. What makes Element Bass different from everything else is that it lets you split your bass DI in up to 3 different channels, allowing you to treat each part of the bass tone frequency range independent of each other. Now, you don't have to use all 3. You can get a good bass tone even with just 1. But for those who want a fat, punchy low end with grinding mids and clanky highs, you're going to want to use all 3 channels. By clicking on a channel, the UI changes to show you that channel's parameters and settings. As I mentioned earlier, each channel is its own full independent chain of processing effects, and everything is color-coded to match, so you can quickly recognize what channel you're on and what settings you're currently tweaking. If you decide you want to remove a channel, you can do that by pressing the X right here. You can control the volume balance between all 3 channels using the respective volume knobs. And if you just want to check just one of the channels by itself, the solo button here will let you do that. The dot indicator over there lets you know if the volume of that channel is too loud and is starting to clip. If it starts blinking red, that channel is clipping. Lower the volume if needed, then rebalance the other channels accordingly. With each channel, you can pick one of 3 preamp options: modern, vintage, and clean. Modern is modeled after a dark glass Alpha Omega 900, giving you that modern, articulate, aggressive bass tone. Vintage is modeled after a Sansamp, giving you that classic grind with a rounded top end. And clean is your bass DI tone untouched. As you can probably imagine, the possible combinations and tones with these 3 options are endless. Let's start with the modern preamp. Because this is modeled after the Alpha Omega 900, you'll notice the parameters are pretty much identical. The blend knob controls the balance between clean DI and the modern preamp. Generally, if you're going to be using more than 1 channel in Element Bass, you probably want to keep the blend at 100, since you'll likely want to introduce the clean DI as its own separate channel that you can blend in later. Drive controls the amount of distortion you want to add to your tone. Mod controls the shape and sound of that distortion. At 1, it's a punchy and tighter sound, and at 20, it's a more raw, out-of-control sound akin to a fuzz. Gain controls the output gain of the preamp going into the Cab IR. Comp controls the threshold in which compression will start to occur on the signal. It's a fixed compressor setting, so you don't have to worry about getting it set up. But you want to move the knob up until you start seeing the dot indicator light up most of the time while the bass is being played. That'll tell you that it's in a good spot. The distortion switch turns off the preamp distortion circuit completely, leaving you with just a clean DI going through the preamp's compressor. I think most people are going to always leave this one on unless you specifically like what the compressor on this preamp is doing. The Bite introduces a high mid boost at 2.8 kHz for added presence and definition. The Growl switch introduces a boost bass for a fatter bass tone. The Graphic EQ we'll get to in a bit. On the top here, we have a switch so you can put your EQ either before the preamp or after. Next up is the vintage preamp. This is modeled after a Sansamp and a Microtube's B7K Ultra. The best of both worlds in my opinion. The type of distortion is very different, but as you can also see, this one has tone knobs compared to the modern preamp. As I explained earlier, the blend knob here controls the balance between clean DI and the vintage preamp. Drive controls the amount of distortion you want to add to your tone. The tone knobs let you control the following frequencies: bass at 100 Hz, low mids at 500 Hz, high mids at 1.5 kHz, and treble at 5 kHz. The comp here works just the same as on the modern preamp. Okay, clean preamp. This one is very simple. It's your clean bass DI signal. The only processing you can do on this channel is compression, and if you like, you can also run it through a Cab IR. Next up is the Cab IR section. Included with Element Bass is 5 different cab speaker mic combinations. We want to give people as much tonal variation as possible without having to spend hours testing different cabs, speakers, and mic combinations. Out of thousands of IRs from our library, these 5 stood out as the best sounding and most tonally diverse. But if you happen to have IRs of your own that you prefer to use, you have the ability to load that in here too. Now onto EQ. One of the most unique and standout features of Element Bass is its graphical EQ. Each channel has its own full-fledged EQ, allowing you to easily frequency split each channel, but also tweak the tone even further. For example, this lets you have channel 1 here be the modern preamp, and maybe you only like the high-end tone of this channel. You can cut everything below the high mids. Then, maybe channel 2 you're using the vintage preamp, and you really like the mids and low mids you're getting from it. Using the EQ, you can cut everything above and below that. Last but not least, you have the third channel, the clean preamp, where your low end can live and flourish without being choked out by distortion. When you create an EQ node on the graph, a parameter box will pop up showing you all the available options. The bypass button lets you, of course, bypass that currently selected EQ point. The Q slider is used to control how narrow or broad the EQ shape is. The frequency slider is used to move the EQ node across the frequency spectrum to wherever you want. Gain controls how much boost or cut you're doing to the selected frequency. Shape lets you pick what kind of filter type you want for that selected EQ node. You have the option between low cut, also known as high pass, low shelf, bell, high shelf, and high cut. Slope lets you pick how many dB per octave the filter is rolling off. A 12 dB octave slope means that for each doubling of frequency, the level is reduced by 12 dB. So the higher the slope, the steeper the filter roll-off is. Mono stereo simply lets you change the plugin from receiving one mono track to one stereo track. If you're using this plugin mostly on bass guitar, then you probably won't have much use for this. But if you're going to use it with synth bass, and that is a stereo signal, then you'll want to turn this into stereo. Next is the limiter. This makes sure your bass guitar's dynamics are much more consistent overall and never get too out of control between the different parallel layers you might have going on. Okay, the 3D effect. What we call 3D is a stereo modulation effect modeled after 2 very similar hardware units. When the knob is at its lowest setting, it models a Roland Dimension D. At its highest settings, it models the symphonic preset from a Yamaha SPX 90. This was inspired by mixing legend Andy Wallace, who uses it on all of his productions. If you have a hard time getting your bass to cut through a mix without stepping over everything, it's likely this one knob will do the trick. To use the 3D feature, you have to make sure that your audio track that you have Element Bass loaded on is outputting in stereo and not mono. Since it's a stereo effect, it only works if you're using a stereo track. Your input can still be mono. I'm pretty sure all DAWs let you put a mono input and stereo output on an audio track these days. Just something to keep note of. Input gain lets you set how hot your bass signal is going into the plugin. Output gain sets how loud the final audio volume is from the plugin. Okay, next is undo redo. As you might have guessed, undo lets you undo the last step you took. Redo lets you redo that. For example, say you got a bass tone dialed in that you love and decided later to tweak it. But then you decided that it was a mistake and you wish you remembered what you had done to it before. Well, now you can just use the undo and redo buttons to help you get back to what you had before. Over in the top middle here, we have the preset browser. We loaded Element Bass with a bunch of mix-ready presets that you can load up for instant great tone and not worry about mixing or tweaking settings. You can also use them as a great starting point for making your own bass tones. The gate is there for those who need it. We have a built-in noise gate that you can use if you're tracking bass and have just a little too much noise coming through. Just simply turn the knob until the noise goes away without affecting your tone and sustain. The bug button is just an easy and convenient way for you to report bugs to us that you might come across. allowing us to work on fixing it as fast as possible. Just click the button, fill out a detailed report of the bug and how we can reproduce it, then press submit. The tuner here is self-explanatory. You can use it to tune your bass in real time if you happen to be using the plugin while tracking. And that's your complete overview of Element Bass. If anything was left out, unclear, or if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us and let us know, or you can ask in the comments section. You can check out Element Bass in the link in the description below. Thanks for watching.